I never imagined that my daughter's first communion, a day I had prayed over and prepared for with every ounce of love in me, would turn into a moment that made an entire church gasp and fall silent. I walked into St. Matthew's Catholic Church that Sunday morning, believing it would finally be a peaceful milestone. I wanted to prove to myself that I could raise my daughter with grace, faith, and dignity, despite everything that had gone wrong after my divorce. I spent weeks planning her outfit, steaming her dress late at night while she slept, and reminding her that God's love is constant, even when people change or disappoint. I held on to the hope that if any day could be untouched by conflict or blame, it would be this one. For those who don't know me, my name is Sarah Whitmore. I am a 33-year-old single mother living in Pennsylvania, and my life revolves around my 9-year-old daughter, Lily. She is my heart, my answered prayer, my proof that God listens. Her first communion meant more to me than just a celebration in a church. It represented survival, forgiveness, and the promise that she could grow into a woman who did not carry the scars I had been forced to wear. I had given up so much for peace, including winning arguments, correcting lies, and proving people wrong. I chose peace so that her childhood would not become a battlefield. But peace was not what greeted me. The moment I walked into the church, I saw them before they saw me. My ex-husband Daniel sat in the front pew with his new wife Rhea and their 4-year-old son Caleb. They were dressed in coordinated navy and white outfits, like a picture-perfect magazine family staged for a church commercial. Their posture alone showed entitlement, as if they were the ones hosting the ceremony. Daniel didn't even glance toward the back where I stood with Lily and my mother, Joan, who held my hand with quiet strength. Rhea flipped her long, honey-blonde hair behind her shoulder and laughed softly at something Daniel whispered. They looked comfortable, unbothered, and confident that they were the center of attention. Lily tugged gently at my sleeve. "Mom, why are they sitting in the front? Isn't that for family?" Her voice was sweet, sincere, and gentle, as if she feared she might be breaking a rule. My throat tightened, but I smiled. "You are family, honey. Wherever you sit, God knows where your heart is." She nodded with trust, the way only a child can, and whispered, "I just wanted you to sit where I could see you." Her words pierced me deeper than she intended. As we walked down the aisle to find a seat in the third row, I could hear the faint, judgment-filled whispers, the kind that are disguised as curious observations but sharpened to hurt. A woman sitting 2 pews ahead nudged her friend and whispered, "That must be the mom. I wonder why she isn't in front." My mother heard it too and squeezed my arm. She hated how often I had been misunderstood, painted wrong, or silently blamed since the divorce. There was no dramatic scandal, no betrayal story, no violence or abandonment. Daniel simply fell in love with someone new and decided that starting over would be easier without me in his picture. He changed his life and expected me to quietly fold myself out of frame. He never said it out loud, but he lived as though I was an inconvenience he couldn't fully erase. And the world always seems to side with the story that is prettier to look at. I tried focusing on Lily instead. She looked like a small angel in her white satin dress, lace gloves, pearl headband, and tiny cross necklace that once belonged to my grandmother. Her eyes sparkled with innocence, not vanity. She practiced placing her hands together in prayer, the way Father Michael taught her. She whispered Bible verses she memorized for the ceremony. She wanted her first communion to be perfect. She didn't care who sat where, who looked richer, or who seemed more admired. But God works in ways that speak louder than reputation, money, or image. I didn't know it then, but Lily was about to become the voice for every ignored mother who tried to shield her child from emotional warfare. She was small, but she had a brave heart that refused to stay silent. And before the ceremony ended, that little girl would walk to the altar, turn toward hundreds of eyes, and speak words none of us were prepared to hear. The morning of the communion started with the kind of peaceful quiet that always made me believe God was gently preparing me for something meaningful. I woke up before the alarm, walked into Lily's room, and sat beside her while she slept. She looked so calm, hands tucked under her cheek, lips parted slightly, her long brown hair spread across the pillow. I whispered a prayer over her, asking God to help her feel loved and protected no matter who clapped for her, smiled at her, or pretended to care. I promised myself that no matter what happened at church, she would not see me crumble. When she woke up, she was beaming with excitement. She hugged me tightly around the waist and whispered, "I feel like God is happy today, Mom." Her innocence was so pure that I almost couldn't hold my emotions. I forced a warm smile and replied, "He is, sweetheart, and he's proud of you." We spent the morning getting ready, and I made sure to speak only hope, never fear. I curled her hair into soft waves, pinned her veil gently, and helped her into her brand new white dress. It wasn't designer or custom-made like Brielle probably would have chosen, but it was perfect. I earned it through 3 months of saving, coupon clipping, and cutting back on takeout. While I worked on her lace gloves, she looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "Daddy is going to be proud too, right?" The hope in her voice felt like a knife. I gently kissed the top of her head and said, "Any good parent should be proud of you today." I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to plant seeds of resentment. I made a silent vow long ago that I would never make her choose sides, even when it felt like I was the only one honoring that decision. My mother arrived right when we were finishing. She wore a pale blue dress and held a small silver bracelet she had polished overnight. "This was mine," she said, sliding it onto Lily's wrist, "and I want you to wear it today so you remember that strong women are part of your story." Lily hugged her, and I couldn't help but feel grateful that at least some love in her life was simple and unconditional. The drive to church was filled with soft music and Lily practicing her prayer responses. She kept glancing at me through the mirror, smiling nervously. "Mom," she asked quietly, "do you think Daddy will ask for a picture with me after?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary and said, "Maybe, but even if he doesn't, I'll take as many as you want." When we pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Dan's car immediately. It was washed, waxed, spotless, reflecting an image of polished success. Lily lit up the moment she saw it and said, "He's here." She ran her fingers along her dress to smooth it, as if preparing for approval. My heart cracked open again, and I silently prayed that he would show love, not performance. We entered the church together, and Lily walked with confidence, skipping slightly the way only a child full of hope does. For a brief second, I thought maybe today really would be different. Maybe she would get a moment where her joy was not rearranged to accommodate adult egos. But my optimism vanished the moment we entered the main worship area and saw Dan and his new family seated in the front pew, perfectly posed like a family portrait. Dan didn't stand when we arrived. Brielle merely glanced back, offering a forced smile that held no warmth. Their son Caleb waved politely, unaware of the subtle war zone he was born into. My mother whispered, "Ignore them. Focus on Lily." I nodded, but my pulse was already racing. When Father Michael stepped onto the altar, he gave me a soft nod, acknowledging the silent battles that only he and I knew existed. He had counseled me through the divorce, reminding me that God sees the unseen and hears what is whispered in the dark. The ceremony began, and Lily joined the other children near the front. She looked back once, locking eyes with me. Her expression was unusual for a child during such a celebration. It carried determination, almost as if she had already made a decision about something she had been holding. I didn't know it yet, but Lily was entering this ceremony with more than sacred intention. She carried secrets, wounds, and observations that no 9-year-old should be processing alone. What happened next would show me that while I spent years praying to be heard, my daughter had found her own voice. The ceremony began with gentle organ music and soft murmurs from families who were excited, proud, and blissfully unaware of the emotional undercurrents that flowed through the pews. Candles flickered near the altar, casting warm reflections on the gold chalice and communion plates. Everything looked peaceful, but my heart thudded painfully beneath my dress. I tried to focus on the beauty of the moment, but my attention kept drifting toward the front pew. Dan sat upright and confident, one arm resting behind Brielle as if they were there representing the modern ideal family. Brielle leaned forward slightly, whispering in his ear with a smirk that never reached her eyes. It didn't take long before she glanced back at me with a slow, deliberate smile, the kind someone wears when they believe they've won a silent competition. I took several slow breaths, refusing to let myself react. Lily deserved a present mother, not one who was mentally tied to a war she never asked for. I kept my chin up, hands clasped, and eyes fixed on my daughter, who stood near the altar with her classmates. She looked small but composed, her eyes focused on Father Michael as he guided the children through the sacred ritual. She placed her hands together in prayer form, knees bent slightly as she practiced her next movement. Everything appeared to be going smoothly until, during a quiet transition, I heard Brielle whisper, not softly, not discreetly, but just loud enough to carry through the aisle. "It's such a shame she has that mother. Imagine how different she could have turned out." The words hit me like a forceful blow. The tone wasn't casual gossip. It was purposeful, cruel, and meant to land exactly where she wanted. I froze, my fingers digging into my palms. My mother, sitting beside me, turned sharply toward the front pew with eyes full of fury. She grabbed my hand, silently urging me not to react, but what hurt more than the statement itself was the tiny realization that Lily stood close enough to hear. Before I could assess whether she actually heard it, I noticed her shoulders lift and tighten. She paused in her steps, her mouth tightening as she glanced briefly over her shoulder. She didn't fully turn, but her eyes flashed with something I had never seen from her before. Not fear, not confusion, but disappointment mixed with awareness. My stomach dropped. Dan leaned slightly away from Brielle, not to correct her, but to keep himself distanced from the consequences of her words. He whispered something back, but he didn't defend me. He didn't ask her to stop. His silence became the second insult. When the communion portion began, each child walked forward with hands folded. Families recorded videos, snapped photos, and exchanged proud smiles. I tried to stay focused, recording Lily with trembling hands. She walked forward with reverence, accepted the Eucharist, and whispered her prayer exactly the way she had practiced. But her face looked different. She wasn't glowing with joy anymore. There was a visible heaviness around her eyes, as if she was processing a truth she wished she could unhear. After receiving communion, the children were supposed to quietly walk back to their seats. Every child did, except Lily. Instead of turning toward me or toward Dan, she paused in the exact center of the aisle, staring straight ahead at the altar. For several long seconds, she didn't move at all. The congregation noticed her stillness, and whispers floated through the air. When Father Michael gently motioned for her to return to her seat, she swallowed, tightened her grip on her rosary, and slowly walked toward him instead. Confusion washed across his face. He bent down slightly, likely expecting that she was feeling faint or nervous. Instead, Lily whispered something into his ear. His eyes widened, not dramatically, but with a controlled pastoral concern that only someone trained in emotional discernment would recognize. He placed a calming hand on her back, but she shook her head gently as if signaling she didn't want to be comforted into silence. Dan shifted uncomfortably, glancing around to see if others noticed. Brielle rolled her eyes, whispering, "Of course she wants attention." Lily then stepped away from Father Michael and turned to face the microphone positioned on its stand. Her small hands gripped the edge. Her voice trembled, but it carried across the sanctuary like a steady bell. "Father Michael," she said softly, "I need to say something. God already knows what's in my heart, but people need to hear what he hears too." A hush fell over the church. In that moment, I no longer feared embarrassment. I feared truth that had been bottled inside a child who shouldn't have had to choose loyalty. And the world was about to know why. For a moment, it felt like the entire sanctuary had stopped breathing. Even the candles near the altar stood perfectly still, as though the air itself refused to move, until Lily spoke. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, and though her hands shook slightly, she did not step away from the microphone. She looked like a child who had suddenly outgrown fear. Father Michael approached carefully, placing himself beside her rather than in front of her. This wasn't the kind of situation a priest could resolve with gentle shushing or a polite reminder about ceremony rules. He understood that whatever Lily was about to say had already grown too heavy to be silently carried any longer. He lowered his voice and asked her calmly, "Lily, are you comfortable speaking in front of everyone, or would you like to talk privately?" She shook her head firmly. "I want to say it here. It's not only about me." That sentence alone made several people quietly shift in their seats. A few parents exchanged glances, unsure whether this was about bullying, school trouble, or a secret confession tied to family conflict. I felt my entire body lock into place, torn between wanting to run to her and recognizing that doing so would make it about me, not her voice. Dan leaned forward abruptly and whispered harshly, "Stop it right now, sit down." The tone wasn't fatherly guidance. It sounded like panic dressed as authority. For the first time, Lily stared directly at him, not with defiance, but with clarity. "No, Dad. You told me secrets are safer quiet, but God says truth should not hide if it hurts people." A collective gasp spread through the pews. Brielle's back stiffened. She whispered through clenched teeth, "Daniel, do something. She's going to embarrass us." My mother leaned toward me and whispered, "She's not embarrassing anyone. She's freeing herself." Every instinct inside me screamed to go to her, but I remembered something I once read. Children don't learn courage by watching others silence themselves. They learn it by witnessing love stand, even if it trembles. So I stayed seated, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles whitened. Seeing the situation escalating, Father Michael raised a hand, signaling reassurance to everyone watching. If a child chooses honesty during a holy moment, it is not our place to silence her. Our role is to listen with open hearts. His words disarmed the tension just enough for Lily to continue. She took a deep breath, eyes steady, and spoke with a shaky but deliberate voice. "My mom teaches me that God hears everything, even when we whisper. She tells me not to talk badly about people, even when they hurt us. But I don't think God wants kids to keep hurt feelings locked up like secrets." Then she added something that made my heart drop into my stomach. "It's hard to be happy today when some people treat my mom like she's less important, like she doesn't count, like she shouldn't be loved by me." Several adults shifted uncomfortably. A woman 2 pews ahead placed a hand over her mouth. Father Michael gently stepped forward. "Lily, would you like to tell us what made you feel that way?" She nodded. The church was silent enough to hear breathing. She continued, voice heavy with emotion. "People say mean things where they think kids won't hear. They say my mom isn't good enough, that I would be better with a new family, that I should feel embarrassed to be hers. But she's the one who loves me every day, who prays with me, who stays even when she's hurting." My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. Dan suddenly stood, face flushed. "Father, this has gone far enough." Before he could continue, Father Michael calmly raised his hand again. "Respectfully sit down. This child has a right to be heard. If we silence children when truth first arrives, we teach them to become adults who never speak it." The authority in his tone forced Dan back into his seat. Lily turned back to the microphone. Her next words were slow and intentional. "And if God sees everything, then he saw what was whispered today. He heard someone say it's a shame she has that mother." I heard it too. A stunned, uncomfortable silence spread across the room like a wave. This was no longer about a ceremony. It was the moment a child stopped absorbing emotional damage and began returning it to its rightful owners, and everyone knew the climax was seconds away. The moment Lily spoke those words aloud, a wave of stunned silence washed across the sanctuary. Some people lowered their heads, others froze mid-breath, and a few tilted their faces toward Brielle and Dan with visible judgment. It wasn't the kind of silence that followed a child's mistake. It was the silence that follows truth hitting its exact target. Lily continued, her voice trembling but stronger than before. "I'm not supposed to say anything when grown-ups are mean. I'm supposed to pretend I didn't hear it. But I heard it today, and I've been hearing things for a long time." She swallowed, her eyes shifting toward me for a small second, almost as if asking for courage, not permission. My heart raced, but I held my gaze steady so she would know I believed in her. "I want to say something to God while people are listening," she said, gripping the microphone stand with both hands. "God, please don't let my mom feel like she's a mistake. She is the best person I know. She loves me even when nobody is watching, even when she is tired, even when she is sad." A few women near the back wiped tears. An elderly man crossed his arms, shaking his head at Dan, as if silently reprimanding him. Lily's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I don't like hearing people say I'm better off with another mom. I only want my mom. And if anyone thinks she's not good enough for me, then they don't know her like I do." Dan stood again, face dark with embarrassment, pride, and anger. "This is unacceptable. She's just confused. She doesn't understand what she's saying." But before he could step closer, Lily turned sharply toward him and said, not loudly but with pure conviction, "I understand perfectly." The room gasped again, but Father Michael placed a firm hand on Dan's shoulder. "Let her finish," he said, his voice gentle but commanding. Lily turned back to the congregation. "My dad told me once not to hug my mom in public because it looks messy. He said I should act more mature, so people don't think our family is weird." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt my chest tighten as every suppressed memory rose like smoke. Moments where Lily hesitated before hugging me in school parking lots, at grocery stores, at playgrounds. I used to think she was just shy. Hearing the truth felt like being cut open without anesthesia. Lily went on. "And one time, Miss Brielle told me that maybe someday she could be my real mom if I wanted, and that I didn't have to be stuck with the life I had." A woman near the front shook her head in disbelief and whispered loudly, "Who says that to a child?" Brielle finally stood. "She's exaggerating. She misunderstood. Kids take things wrong all the time." Lily didn't even turn toward her. "I didn't take it wrong." Dan's voice dropped into warning mode. "Lily, that's enough. You're making your family look bad." She looked directly at him and said, "My family is my mom." A sudden wave of emotion hit me so forcefully, I covered my mouth to stop myself from sobbing out loud. My mother leaned into me, whispering, "This is God's timing, Sarah, not yours." Father Michael finally stepped beside Lily again. "Thank you for trusting us with your truth. Do you have anything else you want to say?" Lily nodded slowly, tears finally falling. "Yes. I want to say sorry to God for pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I want to stop lying when people ask if I'm happy with 2 homes. I want people to stop acting like my mom is a problem. She's not. She's my safe place." She looked at me, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm proud of you." That was the moment I could no longer hold back tears. I stood, walked slowly toward the altar, and she ran straight into my arms, crying in relief rather than fear. Father Michael placed one hand over both of our shoulders and said to the congregation, "A child who speaks truth reveals the morality of adults. Silence protects pride. Honesty protects souls." No one clapped. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The truth had already finished the work. The church remained silent for what felt like a full minute after Father Michael finished speaking. No one shifted. No one coughed. Even children, who are usually restless after ceremonies, sat wide-eyed without a sound. It was as if the entire building recognized that something sacred had taken place, something far deeper than a traditional milestone. Lily wasn't just a little girl in a white dress anymore. She was a witness. She was a truth-teller. She was a child who refused to let love become something she felt obligated to hide. When I finally opened my eyes and looked at her, she was still holding on to me with both arms around my neck, breathing heavily, cheeks flushed, tears streaking her face. But she wasn't trembling. There was relief in her body, not fear. She had released something that had been pressing on her spirit, and I felt the weight lift from mine as well. My mother stood up quietly and wrapped her arms around the two of us. She whispered, "This is what breaking a cycle looks like," and kissed Lily on the top of her head. I realized then that although I had always tried to shield my daughter from emotional harm, she didn't choose silence as a coping method. She chose honesty as a way forward. She didn't want to carry my pain or hers. She wanted to end it. When I turned back toward the pews, Dan and Brielle were both sitting stiffly, their faces pale and tight. For once there was no smirk, no whisper, no confident posture. They weren't being attacked. They had simply been witnessed. In a world full of adults who protect reputations at all costs, there was poetry in seeing truth, spoken by someone who couldn't yet reach the top shelf without asking for help. Father Michael cleared his throat gently. "We will now conclude today's ceremony with a closing blessing," he said. But before he continued, he looked directly at Lily and said quietly, "Thank you for your courage. Many grown-ups never learn to speak what you just spoke." His voice was soft, Not performative, not dramatic, just honest and pastoral. After the ceremony ended, families slowly lined up to congratulate their children, but almost every parent who passed me placed a hand on my shoulder, nodded respectfully, or whispered, "Your daughter is extraordinary." One mother said, "What she did today will change the way a lot of us talk around our kids." Another whispered, "Your daughter spoke for more children than you realize." I didn't need validation, but I felt gratitude for the kindness. Meanwhile, Dan approached us with rigid posture and controlled tone. "We should talk," he said, glancing around as if he feared someone live-streaming the conversation. "No," I replied calmly. "We should listen. Lily told you what she needed from you, and I'm not going to translate it. Don't talk to me until you're ready to talk to her with respect, not damage control." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, realizing this wasn't a moment he could steer. Brielle stood a few feet behind him, her eyes glossy, but she didn't walk away. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't realize she was hearing those things. I shouldn't have said them." Lily stepped forward and looked directly at her. "Words don't disappear just because grown-ups regret them later." Brielle nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry." It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was the first honest sentence I had heard from her since the divorce. Later that night, while tucking Lily into bed, I asked her gently, "What made you decide to speak in front of everyone instead of talking to me later?" She laid still for a moment, fingers tracing the edge of her bracelet, then whispered, "Because I didn't want God to think I agreed with them. And if I don't speak when something hurts, people think it's okay." Her answer didn't just move me, it taught me. I realized that protecting children isn't only about shielding them from pain. It's also about teaching them that their voice has value. Silence may keep the surface peaceful, but it can make a heart feel crowded. I grew up believing survival meant restraint. My daughter taught me survival sometimes means revelation. That night, I turned off the lamp, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You will never have to pretend to be okay to protect me. Truth is not disloyalty." She smiled sleepily and whispered, "It feels better now." And it did. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth no longer lived in the dark. Thank you for listening to my story. I never thought my daughter's first communion would become the moment that changed everything, but I learned that sometimes healing starts in the most unexpected places. Children may be small, but their hearts recognize truth far earlier than we think. And no matter how others try to define your worth, love always reveals itself louder than judgment. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, or if it made you think differently about the quiet strength children carry, then please let me know. Your thoughts matter, and your voice deserves to be heard too. Make sure to like the video, share it with someone who needs it, comment your feelings below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life emotional storytelling. Your support helps these stories reach people who might be going through the same silent battles, reminding them that they are not alone. Thank you for watching, and I hope you join me again for the next story.